It doesn't allow you to have a more open idea when it comes to artificial intelligence. As an example, we were in GMU, Gulf Medical University last week. We were discussing with dentists about how to solve their problem statements. And the ideas are, okay, digitizing, the patient records, you record, their X-rays into digital files. But how about having a robot to actually do the dentistry, right? That's taking the problem solving the problem from a different angle. So artificial intelligence should be the first strategy before digital transformation, we believe. One of the reasons, again, which this will make sense later today, is obviously data is all networked, it's all connected, right? It's not in like the silos as we explained before. And the key factor with HPC is you can look beyond what a human can see when it comes to patterns or behavior or connections between those data points. And you'll find out today how those different data points affect the end outcome. Okay, there may be a small influence on something, or there may be a large influence, but you can't detect it as a human, whereas AI can do that, and it can keep on learning. So traditionally, governments have always looked at a tender-based approach. Again, tender is too fixed, it's an end outcome, it's a $2, $3, $4, $5 million implementation, whereas we look at it as AI being an agile process. Okay, you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know where you're going to move, but that's the way AI works. You start small and you incrementally build it up along the way. Because that's basically what you're trying to get to. All right, your data visualization is in 3D. It's not 2D. It's not flat. It's not what do you call it? Many systems and many organizations basically look at data the same way they do 30 years ago. With HPC, you can look at all different angles. You can add different data sources as well. That's our main challenge statement. I know today is more about societal benefits, but there is a commercial benefit as well in terms of reducing costs and making things more efficient. So the idea is that we cannibalize. We basically eat our own technology in essence because we're reducing the cost and reducing the need for that particular problem. So what do? We do experimentation. Okay, so a lot of open source technology, we grow it over time, and we just model. That's what the HPC is built there to do. Okay, so obviously Lenovo guys are here today as well. We've been working with them. You do lots of modeling, you use lots of data. Before you implement something, you can test as much as you want. And that's the idea behind this. And that's why we're here. And obviously we're here to work with the university on that as well. And then scaling. So again, you're not having to scale in terms of, you want one big end outcome. You can grow it in monetary terms, $50,000 slots, you can do it $100,000, but you're building your system as you go, right? As the data input comes back in, that's how you'll be expanding it. And that's it for the moment.
Thank you, Raj. Sorry for the technical glitches. So while we work on the challenges here on putting it up, yes, he's here. So I would like to introduce Nazir Afzal. He's joining us on Zoom link from UK. He's an OBE, a British solicitor and a former prosecutor in the Crown Prosecution Services. And he soon became the Chief Prosecutor, Crown Prosecutor in the Northwest England. He's best known for tackling cases involving violence against women and sexual exploitation of children. He has written an autobiography which has been commended by one and all, and has a Netflix series which is dedicated to him, which is there coming up very soon. Nazir has been traveling around the world as an advocate of safety of women and children. So Nazir, I hand on the speaking session to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me, although I can't be with you in person. that I can join you from several thousand miles away. It's a real pleasure, Your Highness, colleagues, to be able to talk to you a little bit about what we can do together. I'm obviously very delighted to be an advisor to AHB on this particular project, because as I think all of us recognise, child safeguarding is one of the major challenges that we face globally. And as was said a moment ago, I was the first Muslim chief prosecutor in the UK. My family originally came from Pakistan. I was born in the UK. First Muslim chief prosecutor. I led nationally for 10 years on child abuse in the UK. And globally as well. I've been working internationally in some countries on the same issue. Then I became the first Muslim chief executive of police commissioners in the UK. And today one of my many roles is the Chancellor of the University of Manchester. And there are probably 1,000 plus graduates or alumni from Manchester who are in the UAE, so they will know that we are one of the top 30 universities in the world. We have 25 Nobel Prizes, and as I said, we work across many disciplines and are globally leading in 93% of our research. What do I want to talk about? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that child safeguarding is the subject of this conversation, but I wanted to share with you two examples of institutional failure from the UK to just give you a picture as to what could be done differently. If I talk about human trafficking first, very quickly, a young girl in Pakistan, she was deaf, she was mute, she suffered from severe learning difficulties, and she was 10 years old. And she was sold by her family to another family. That family then brought that child to the UK. Despite the fact that the child had a forged passport that said she was 19 and she was 10, the UK border authorities just let her through. For the next 10 years, she remained in the basement of their house in the UK, where she was being used for forced labour, where she was being farmed out to other families to do cleaning work, and she was also helping in the delivery of other criminal enterprises. She was also being taken to the UK government to obtain welfare payments for her disability, and at no point did anybody question the fact that she couldn't speak, she couldn't hear, that she suffered all those difficulties, and they simply ignored her and did not in any way think that it was their problem. Yet it was their problem. At the end of the day, two individuals from the local council who were visiting the house for a planning issue found her in the house and took pity on her and took her to the police, where she was placed in a place of safety. And eventually we were able to prosecute the whole family, and they were all convicted of trafficking and went to prison. And we were also able to confiscate their property in order to give her and compensate her for the future. The point I make is that UK borders, UK local government, UK council, medicine, you name it, every authority institution in the UK completely missed this and did not have the ability to share information or to even analyse the information that they had. In another scenario I dealt with 12 years ago, a group of men were abusing 47 young girls over a period of several years and just passing them around amongst each other. Each one of them had made complaints to somebody, but that had never been captured. And the police in the UK had no understanding of what they were dealing with. At the end of the day, we brought the prosecution and those men were convicted. But we realised that the sharing of information was key here, or the lack of sharing of information is what put those children at significant risk, and as a result, nothing was ever done to protect them. So my call to you, and what I think we and AHB will be able to do, is to support you in identifying what information needs to be gathered, how that information can be relayed and shared, and ultimately how it can be analysed, and then be able to identify the risks that individuals face in such a way that early intervention is possible. You lead the world, the UAE, with your acknowledgement of the UN Charter and Madima's law, have recognised that the child is at the centre of our society and how it needs to be protected in so many ways. And I think that AI provides us with potential and opportunity. People are often very scared of new technologies, Zoom being a good one. But the reality is that we can use technology to put us in a position where we can identify risk, where we can then intervene early. And how do we intervene early? Thousands, if not tens of thousands of children, not just in the UK, millions around the world would be protected and could be protected going forward. And you know, many of the things I've said is that we know, you know, that these behaviours happen in plain sight. The victims, children of the most vulnerable people in our society, they are the ones who are least listened to. They're the ones that are least heard. And we have to understand that it's our responsibility as adults to provide them with safety and to ensure that their welfare is key here. And that's the point. The child's welfare, in the UK we have a saying, the welfare of the child is the first priority. It doesn't matter what the parents may be doing, it doesn't matter what the community may be doing, we must protect the child first and foremost, through early detection, through online safety, through predictive analytics, through child tracking where necessary, through resource allocation, and through decision-making support. AI can do all of those things. And that's what we need to be able to get to a position where we're through the algorithms that we're developing, that AHB have developed, that you'll be able to identify those young children at risk through child abuse or neglect, use machine learning to analyze the patterns of behavior, in order to monitor activity so that you can be ahead of the game rather than playing catch up. And that analyze and predict future challenges and future potential risks to children, and ultimately prevent serious harm that will flow from that. There are so many opportunities. There's so much I want to say. I'm afraid there are other people you want to hear from, and I'm more than happy to answer questions very, very shortly. But I want to say that I'm committed to support you. I'm committed to work with the UAE and the Sharjah authorities specifically in order, through AHB, to make sure that the children, your children, are safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nazir Afzal, for that experience that you shared with us. Some devastating incidents. We must be blessed to be relatively safe out here, but that doesn't mean that we don't safeguard our children. We still have to continuously keep working on it. Let me introduce to the next presenter who is going to be here. His name is Chris Miller. He's a domain expert for childcare and policing. Chris, please welcome. He was the detective chief of Superintendent Hertfordshire. He managed around 300 staff with a budget of 20 million pounds plus, and developed the most advanced collaborative policing unit in the country. After retiring in 2011, Chris now uses technology to improve policing through rehabilitation and prevention of crime. He chairs a London Safeguarding Board and advises national government special advisors on policies and regulations. Chris was the chair of London for the Barn House, an Icelandic idea where medical, social services, police and court services all come under one roof, which is pretty much prominent here also in Kanaf, which is again born out of the Barn House Icelandic idea. So, Chris.
Thank you very much. Your Royal Highness, colleagues, distinguished guests, thank you for inviting me to speak. I was 32 years a police officer, and I've been out of policing now for just over 10 years. And one conversation I remember was when one of my sergeants that was working for me, a very good sergeant, said to me, he said, "Boss," that's what they call me, boss, he said, "I've got to retire." He said, "I could take it when I arrested the children of the people I first arrested, but I'm now arresting the grandchildren of the people I first arrested." And the point he was making there, apart from that he was getting old and a bit tired, he wasn't actually, he was very vigorous, but he was towards the end of his service, is that this stuff trickles down through the generations. That if you are the child of somebody who has got into trouble, whatever that may mean, you are more likely yourself to get into trouble. So I got very interested in police. I spent years catching people and putting them in front of courts and locking them up, but I got much more interested in prevention. How could you actually stop the cycle that caused people to get into trouble, help people to become more productive citizens? And so that's how I've got to where I've got to. I just want to talk through one or two of those things now. So Raj is very keen on this, so we've got it up there. So software ate the world, and now AI is eating software. The point being that artificial intelligence is the next big step change to help us with performance improvement, whether that's in a business setting or in fact in the sort of government setting that I move around in. So why did children fail to thrive? I wasn't sure that fail to thrive would be entirely understandable to those of you for whom Arabic is your first language and perhaps English. So I got that from Google Translate, and an Arabic friend has said that is what it means. So children who don't make the very best progress in their life. So we've got this thing in the UK, and you may well have heard of the first 1,000 days. When you're born as a baby, you have something like 1 trillion unconnected neurons in your brain, and every second, 1,000 of them get knitted together, and they get knitted together to create neural pathways in your brain that help you form your character. You're a blank sheet of paper when you're born, pretty much, and then you gradually form. And the way that you live in those first 1,000 days of your life is what links those neural pathways together. So if you are neglected, abused, assaulted, see violence, and so on and so forth in your life, when you're for the first 1,000 days, even though you don't know that it's happening to you, the way that your network and your brain comes together means that you are in trouble. And so that's the first thing, that children fail to thrive because those first 1,000 days don't work for them. Adverse childhood experiences. If as a child you see your parents or those who care for you fighting and being violent, if one of your parents or siblings dies, or one of them goes to prison, or you're neglected, those adverse childhood experiences, they compound over time. The Welsh Government, which is part of the UK government but sort of slightly separate, has done a lot of research on this, and they have come to the conclusion that if you experience 4 of these adverse childhood experiences before you are 11, then that has a significant impact upon the way you are going to grow into a young adult and go on into later adult life. And then another little phrase that we use is the toxic trio, the 3 elements in a child's life that, if they are present, means that they are potentially going to be in trouble. When I say in trouble, well, that can mean a whole load of things. That means they can get in trouble with the police. It means they can fail to reach their potential academically. It means they can have mental health problems, a whole series of things. If you grow up in a home where there is significant parental mental ill health, particularly if that's untreated and undiagnosed, if you see your parents or your carers being violent towards each other, or if your parents or carers have got substance misuse in their family, then that toxic trio, and quite often they come together, because if you have mental health, you may well there may well be some violence, there may well be drugs, and vice versa. If you take drugs and if you overconsume alcohol, that may well lead to mental ill health and then violence. If those are present in a child's life, then you are very unlikely to thrive. Not impossible, but it's difficult. That's right, I've gone 1 too many. No. That's it. So, sorry? Try it again. You can try it. It's showing on my screen here, but not on this screen. Next one. Excellent. Okay. So these are some of the initiatives that, in order to combat the lack of development in the first 1,000 days, in order to combat issues around adverse childhood experiences, in order to combat the toxic trio, these are just some of the things that we have brought into being, probably in the last 2 decades, last 20 years in the UK. So, Sure Start centres, these are places where children under the age of 5 can go before they go to school. They're early learning centres, they're places where children can get some of the developmental support that they're not necessarily getting at home. They have been a very significant success in the UK in helping children prior to their school years. The great thing about going to school is you're always being observed, or you should be being observed, cared for and looked after by people who generally have got your welfare to heart. If you're under 5 and you're not at school and you're not in a great home, then of course that isn't happening in your life. Sure Start Centres bridges that gap. And so across the country we have a network of centres where children under the age of 5 can be attended by a family can go. For those who, so this toxic trio, when it gets so bad that the courts intervene, we set up specialist family courts. So where parents have substance misuse problems or alcohol problems, then there is a specialist court that will deal with those parents and that child. The same judge hears the same case, and they bring the parents back time and again. It's having that, well, it's almost parenting the parents, and they have fantastic results in terms of decisions are made quicker, and reunification among families and stability among families is better. We also had to have a comprehensive set of services in the cases of domestic abuse. Again, this came in 2006. So there is a special court that will hear domestic violence cases, because it's very difficult for somebody who's been the victim of domestic violence to give evidence with confidence. So you've got, and specialist refuges for, it tends to be women, although it could be men, but it tends to be women who need to get away from their abuser. We developed programs for perpetrators to help them think differently about the way they interact with their partner or with their children. And we've got a very interesting program of liaison between police and schools, so that when the police attend an address where there's been some form of abusive incident, and there is a child living in that house, whether present or not, the school the following day gets a message from the police saying, we went to that house last night because there was an incident, you need to keep an eye on these children, because if they suddenly start playing up or something's happened on something, you need to know the reason for it. So do keep an eye on them, because we know, going back to that adverse childhood experience, we know that that domestic violence incident has affected them. And if they're, the littler they are, the more it's affected them. We have a special program for teenage mothers, so we have a wraparound service for any girl under the age of 20 that gets pregnant. There's a specialist service that will see them right through to the age till their child is 2. They get because generally speaking, in the UK, it's not good for single women who don't have a partner, a permanent partner, to have children, and we don't want them until they're really ready to do so to have more children, and this reduces teenage pregnancy. Another thing that we brought in 2006 is the Child Death Overview Panel. So this is where all of the organisations that may have had some impact upon a child or a family's life come together to discuss the death of any child. So in London, I chair one of these panels in London. In London, we look at 600 of these a year, and we have the police, the social services, a lot of health representatives, probation, prison service, local authority. We will discuss whether that child has died of, a congenital illness, or whether they've committed suicide, or whatever's happened to them. Because we're trying to learn lessons to drive down the rate of child mortality. We have specialist services for children with mental ill health. And in London, we have now developed, we have a child house, which I think that the folk out here have been thinking about. Barner House, it's called in Iceland. It's where, and Satish introduced me, we pull all the services together that can help a child that's been abused. So the police, medical services, forensic services, and social services come together. They all work under one roof. They have one supervisor in charge, they have one vision, one goal, and that's about helping that child progress from the point that abuse has been disclosed through to the conclusion of the case, to support them. And we support the families as well, provided the families are not the abusers. If the families are the abusers, obviously we have to do different things with them. So we have a 3-stage process in the UK. For children who just fail to thrive, they're not getting on as well as they should. We have a child need plan. If that doesn't work, and the children are at risk of harm, we have a child protection plan, more intensive supervision, the child stays with the family work with specialists to try and deal with whatever he needs in that child's life. And if it gets so bad that the child's in danger, then the child becomes looked after by the state. And of course, it's not necessarily a sequence, because in fact sometimes it's so obvious that this needs to happen, the child will be taken straight into care. We don't like to do that, because children are better in their families, and also for this reason, it's the cost of it. So this is the, so £5 billion it costs the UK to look after 25 billion dirhams, I think, isn't it, just about, to look after children. Very expensive, which is not a reason for doing it because it's expensive, but if you can have a less intensive intervention, obviously that's better. And you can see the child, and these are the numbers, so 80,000 children in the UK, the last time the data was collected, it's collected annually, were being looked after, so that means they were in foster homes, they had been adopted, or they were in children's homes that were run by the state. And generally speaking, if you're older as a child, it's much more difficult to get foster parents and more difficult to get adoption. So if you're very young, you're a tiny baby, they get adopted. If you're 15 and you go into care, then you're probably going to go into a children's home. Very expensive. Child protection plan, 51,000. So actually fewer people on child protection plans than there are being looked after. And then the number of children in need, nearly 500,000. That number hasn't changed over 20 years. These numbers have changed hugely. Now we're doing some work with Coventry City Council. There's 131 councils in the UK that have this child's care responsibility. And Coventry City Council is pretty much in the middle in terms of the average size. It's got a population of 250,000 people. And those are the numbers that one council will be dealing with. So you saw the big pyramid for the whole country. And we're trying to do some work with Coventry City Council to help them do their predictive analysis of how they can stop children getting there, but perhaps deal with them here, or even not even here at all. Right, you can never, as one detective once said to me, you can do a lot of things with statistics and data, but what you can't do is hide the bodies. That data is always pretty accurate. So this is 176 years of child deaths by neglect, or homicide, or assault in the UK. Coroners, this data is pretty accurate, being kept by coroners, and you can see that, you can't actually see what the numbers are there, but it doesn't really matter, you can see the numbers have gone down. So that's, we start here in 1850, before the world began almost, and we end up here in 2016, and the numbers have gone down. So that's been going down year by year. Now, if you just focus on this bit here, right, we're now going to go to the next slide. This is records of children, local authority registrations of abuse. Now, although those numbers of homicides have gone down, these registrations of abuse have gone up. This is counting, this is recognition, this is identification. That previous one, this is the outcome. So these are still coming down, but there's a lot more of this being counted. And that makes sense, because if you find it, you count it, and you intervene, then of course what you did is that, it comes down. So it's good that those numbers go up, provided what you're getting is these numbers coming down. Okay, so the challenge is early intervention in the lives of children who might otherwise fail to thrive could be cost-effective, and it's not really just about the cost, although that is important because no organisation's got limitless resources, preventing future costs. But of course, it's also much better for them as individuals, and it's better for their families. You intervene earlier, they don't get taken into care. You don't have to have an intensive child protection plan. You can manage them at a lower level. And if we can identify the nature, scope and timing of the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and other negative factors, build them into an algorithm, we will possibly, and we believe probably, be able to identify children who are going to fail to thrive in the future. We can identify them earlier and intervene earlier. So, this is where the AI piece comes in. Establishing relatedness using AI tech. I won't read that through, but what it does, it creates a database of connections. So making the link between being excluded from school, seeing your parents commit domestic abuse, being neglected, not being able to read properly, missing your injections, missing your inoculations, all of those are data points on the child's life. What AI will do, it will work out what is the link between each of those issues and how are they connected. Which are the strongest links? Find future connections and offer some prediction. So intervene earlier, stop children failing to thrive, stop them becoming adults who have a difficult life by understanding this earlier. You've seen that, so I'll leave that statement. So this is how we need to do it. So the business case is it good business to identify children much earlier in their line of line of neglect and things not going quite right, and then you work out your solution, you need data source, you generate your AI model, you then verify that by using other cases, and then you can systematize it by having a product which other people are interested in, and then you can develop it so it becomes business as usual. And these are a whole, it's a sort of difficult you see at the back. But these are, if you think of social services database, police database, education, Department of Justice, and health services, all of these are various points in the line, in the line of the life of a child, which an algorithm will identify. So at the end here, with a historic case, with a case where we look backwards, we have a child that's got into trouble. We look back on its data, we find all these data points, we map them, we put into our algorithm, and then that becomes a predictive tool for the future, because other children will have similar paths to that point. And then we, instead of waiting here until the child is in prison, we intervene here and put in some intensive. That's just a continuation of that. There we go. So we start with historical data. We use the Kyoto algorithm. We code it, we trial it, we scale up, we deploy, and we maintain. And in order to do that, we were hoping the Child Services Department were going to be here. And this is where we've had conversations with them. We need some historic cases in order to do that modelling. We need a domain expert to help us interpret the data. I mean, I can interpret it from a British point of view, but not obviously from an Emirati point of view. And then we need information from other coordinating agencies. And if we can get that, we can turn that Kyoto algorithm into a predictive opportunity to prevent child abuse and child neglect. That's it. Yes.